Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Pixel Puzzle. Whether this is your first listen or you've been with us from day one, make yourself at home. But here's something to remember. This series was made to open up the world of visual effects to absolutely everyone in a way that is human, accessible, and real. Each episode connects to the next, and together they tell a bigger story. Not just about how films get made, but about the people making them. Today, we're stepping into the director's chair, but not just any chair. We are joined by someone who brings genre, comedy, heart, and sci fi weirdness together with genuine vision. You might know her from Loki, Sex Education, or her new work on Doctor Who and The Last of Us. She's a writer, director, producer, and possibly the only person who's ever dared to pitch Marvel at 80 pages doc that actually worked. Kate Herron, welcome to the show.
Hi. Hello. Hi.
That's quite a tag to have on yourself, right? Like Marvel is as tough as you get, and you've been so brave and just went for it.
The thing that I always worry about now, though, is that whenever I do pitches, people are like, "Where's the 80-page doc?" Huh? Like, and I'm like, "Oh no!" So do I have to do this every time? But no, it's fine. But no, look, I think for me with Loki, like as you said, like I directed on a show called Sex Education, which I really enjoyed, but it wasn't a sci-fi show or genre or super effects heavy. I think the most I did on that show was probably painting out a track. We did some cool, like practical kind of in camera trick stuff, but like I built like an upside down room. But in terms of like, like Miss Minutes or, there was nothing on that level. So yeah, so I did definitely go for it for sure when I pitched that.
Let's go back to your beginnings for a moment.
Mhm.
Do you remember what got you into filmmaking?
Honestly, so I took film studies in sixth form, partly because I wanted to go to drama school and I just thought I should know more about cinema because I was like a kind of like theater school kind of I did like drama club on the weekends and I was very into theater. So I was like, okay, I should learn more about cinema. And I did like movies, like I go to the movies a lot with my friends, but I'd never like studied it. So I remember I took this course and then I was like, oh, actually, I can do everything I really love because I at my drama club I'd already started directing there because I'd asked like, oh, actually, could I direct some of the plays rather than act in them? And I used to write like fan fiction for my friends, mainly like very jokey, kind of silly stuff, but I love writing. Like I've always written stories. So I remember doing film studies and I was like, oh, I mean, this sounds like to anyone that likes films, they'd be like, yeah, of course you can. But I didn't ever really kind of piece together you could make a film and have like a voice, if that makes sense. I don't know why I hadn't thought of this, but it just really opened up my mind in terms of what I learned on that course in sixth form. And I think I changed to applying to like, yeah, like film school pretty quickly in that time. And I was like, oh, I was like, I want to direct, I want to do this. so so that was my beginnings basically, yeah. But I remember it was fun as well because it was like rediscovering, like I love the movie Jaws and I've always been obsessed with that film, but it was really fun learning about filming techniques and then finding like new love for that movie, obviously, just even in terms of like, how Spielberg worked with the limitations he had on that film with like the shark, for example, because filmmaking for me, it's always in a strange way about limitations and like the puzzle kind of solving of, okay, this was the intention. I can't quite deliver this, but how can I get to a place that I wanted it to be? Because like with short filmmaking, that's all it is a lot of the time. You know, you have very high expectations, but your resources are limited usually just because you're trying to make something very ambitious, usually not on a lot of money. So I think that really scratched my brain in some ways. I just really liked the challenge of that and the collaboration. Like I said, I used to make like, like some of my friends used to make like short films and I would act in those. And I thought that was really fun. And I liked the kind of just like the community you find in making something.
Yeah. Do you miss acting by any chance, or?
No, I think I remember I acted in one of my friend's films and I was so bad. And this was part of the reason I applied to film school, because I was like already like, oh, I think I like directing. And then I watched myself, because I'd acted in, like, you know, like I said, it was like Saturday morning drama club stuff. So like I'd done, and I did used to make like silly films with my friends. But I remember I acted in one of my friend's films, and I remember watching myself act and I was like, wow, I'm so bad. And I was like, I can't do this as a job. This is hard. It's so stinky. So I changed to do film. But I'm very comfortable with actors as consequence, though, I would say, and have a lot of respect for it, because it's hard, you know, putting yourself out there, but also to do it well is very hard. So but no, I did like doing my writing partner is a very good improviser and very in the improv comedy scene, so they kind of persuaded me to do some like shows and stuff with that. So I really enjoyed that. And I did stand up for a very brief moment in time, but very brief. But so I enjoyed doing those. But yeah, but I definitely think I found like my place in terms of like what I do now. But I think all that stuff definitely has, you know, like all the live comedy stuff really helped with pitching, and improv definitely helped with being open-minded when people give you notes and you're like, oh, okay, that's very different to what I thought we were going to do, but how do I like yes and that idea? Yeah, and just being confident with publicly speaking and the rest of it. So yeah.
It just putting yourself out there, right? Like I hear from a lot of comedians that it's really daunting when you do it for the first time. But as you do it more and more, you kind of like get a sense of like you focus on who you're talking to and how they're reacting and how is it going. So I'm sure that gave you a lot of skills to do what you do now.
It was fun. I should say as well, I never got so like I was never successful at it. I just did like the very like first like level kind of gigs. But I really yeah, but it definitely gives you a thick skin for sure. And for criticism as well, for sure.
Well, you weren't successful for fame, but you obviously were successful because you're using that and you're using it very well. So yeah, that's.
No, I always honestly think that I think particularly for directors, if you want to direct, I think having some, even if it's just taking an acting class or like, I think I something I did try and do for this job, honestly, is get as much insight as I can into each person I'm working with, who will obviously be an expert in that field compared to what I understand, but just having enough understanding so I can support them and also know what direction I need to give, basically.
You've got this reputation for blending emotional storytelling with big, bold genre worlds and somehow keeping it all feeling grounded and human. Um, can you tell us about that a bit? Like, what would you say is your style and identity
Hmm.
as a filmmaker if you needed to describe yourself?
That's interesting. I like how you just described it. I'd be like, oh, that please. But yeah, look, I think that in terms of the films I love, like I've already mentioned, like I loved Spielberg. Like growing up, like I Jaws scared me, and then I became obsessed with it, probably because I was a bit scared of the film when I was a kid. But then I had such a respect for just the craft of it. And then as a grown up, I have a very different, relationship with that film. I just really love it because I think it's great storytelling. But I would say in terms of the genre, it's so funny because I would always say like big genre stories with heart and humor. But then I obviously directed on The Last of Us, which is very harrowing. But I should say that obviously I'm not writing on that show. So I do think that's a fun thing I like to do sometimes as a director, is that if I'm jumping onto someone else's show, it's like, okay, well, how can I push myself as a director here or do something that I wouldn't necessarily do on a project that I'm writing or leading in that way? So I would say though that in terms of the stuff that's more me, yes, it would be like big genre with heart and humor. And the humor is just like I said, like I spent a lot of time in the comedy world. Most of the shorts I made were with comedians. Like I love comedians, and I just that's originally, to be honest, the area that I was really drawn to was just comedy film and making comedy. So I think that will always be in the stories. But for me, the best genre, it is character first, and that is what kind of hooks you into it. Like, I can I love the world building aspect of telling a big story, but I have to be on board with the lead character just in terms of like willing to go on a journey.
Has the use of visual effects impacted your approach to filmmaking in any way at all?
Oh, completely. I mean, I think it was really interesting because I remember pitching on Loki, and I think sometimes there can be a thing when you're going up for a job to like shy away from something if you haven't done a lot of it. But with Loki, I was like, no, I'm gonna just go at this. So I made like, I did like this isn't special effects, but I did like a stunts reel basically in terms of like the fighting styles. Cause I was like, Loki's fighting style is very balletic and very established, whereas like Sylvie's wasn't. So I was like, I want her to be scrappy and fight in a slightly different way to him. And I had references that backed that up. And it was the same with the special effects. Like, for example, the first episode in the script, it was originally written that every time we saw one of Loki's memories, we would just kind of cut to the clip, basically, like from the past movie. And so I was like, that I like the concept of this, but I think it would be more interesting to me if he's what like, because it did say that he was in a room watching them, and I was like, can we not just stay in the room with him? And I really like the film Minority Report, so in like the reel, I kind of cut together a special effects and how that would look. I put in that moment with Tom Cruise where he sees that like life-size projection of his wife, and it's like, it's so good on a story level because it feels like he could reach out and touch her, but she's not there obviously. And that like, and so I think for me that was the kind of thinking I had with this like TVA time theater, was that I wanted it to feel like he was almost watching like a play of his life on a stage. So that was the idea I had, and I thought that would be way, because for me it's way more interesting to stay in the room with him watching his memories, because also like I've seen all these films, and even if you haven't seen them, I think psychologically that's really interesting, and it ended up working really well. But then we had really cool moments like the DB Cooper scene, and I was like, yeah, let's go full screen for that, because that's a new memory and something new we're giving fans, but also it just helps kind of, I don't know, like give like a breather in terms of the rhythm of how that's cut together. But yeah, so that's an example of how when I was pitching special effects, that was like a moment that I picked out. And I'm trying to think what else I had in there. I think I had a lot of stuff about how we use memory. I really like practical sets. So I had I think I had a bit from Scott Pilgrim in there, like where he's in like the bathroom and he steps out and then he's in high school. So, and I said, like, I think it would be cool with the TVA building if we could build a lot of these spaces, because it is this cool new corner of the MCU. So yeah, and they really responded to that. And we did end up having more or less like a lot of practical sets, and then with obviously like, extension with VFX. But I think for me that's always the harmonious kind of blend, is having both the art department and your visual effects department kind of work hand in hand. And also partly the films I grew up with use that method, so part of me is bringing that kind of sensibility as well, because it's what I've seen.
No, and that came across really, really well. Have you ever had a moment where the process of integrating visual effects made you rethink a scene in a particular way that you didn't really plan for?
It wasn't so much rethinking it, but I think for me it was just about making sure, for example, with like alligator Loki, you have like a, basically you have like, honestly it looks like a cuddly toy, and you put it in the shot and it's just there for reference, and then you take it away and then you're filming nothing basically. And so for me it was just making sure that it sounds strange, but just that I had enough different angles in terms of where we, and so I could give that to the special effects team, because obviously they're going to bring the emotion of that character and make it come to life. So I think for me, it was just fun in terms of working out, yeah, how do I get all the kind of pieces I need so we can build this later in the edit in terms of rethinking. I mean, honestly, one of the best things I've ever seen is Richard E. Grant. Because when we filmed Goliath for episode 5 of Loki, we had nothing. I had art, and he was standing on like a kind of grass patch, but completely surrounded by blue screen, and we were blasting him with a fan. And I had a microphone and I was like, okay, now the monster is coming towards you and now this is happening. And watching him fully commit and go for, I mean, I think that's the thing. Like, if you have great actors, and so much of like, because that's what I mean. Like, having the art to show him was helpful, but he completely gave that scene so much emotion. And that really helps, like, you know, the artists and everyone around, like, really build something epic, because the acting he brought to the table was epic. So I think in terms of that was the funnest thing for me, honestly. Like, I just really enjoyed it. I've always been told that I would probably enjoy working in animation because I'm very detail orientated, but yeah, but I think those were the things, I suppose, not rethinking, but in some ways I was learning how to do that. You know what I mean? While I was doing it, because I hadn't filmed anything like that before.
Yeah, yeah. And you need to try. I guess it's a moment where you actually need to trust the process, because you can't really
Yeah.
see it. But I think that's the. I mean, that's the magic. I think a lot of people. I mean, our audience, hopefully, majority of them understand the process now, because we've been through a journey. But I think what BFX normally is taken as a rigid kind of like a more technical process, but we actually need to fit in with everything else. Like, we just part of the world. So having this amazing acting is what it will, it will
Mm.
put the pieces together for us to do our job and to blend in perfectly at the later stage.
Yeah, completely. And also just having, like, you know, like the different stages. Like, we had a fantastic previs team on Loki, like led by Jesse and me, Jesse and Callum, my editor. I remember over the Christmas like period that we'd been filming, we were building episode 5 with Eliath, you know, and we were going through loads of different drafts of that. And like, the thing is, look, you had the story beats and I knew the rough shape of the story, but just in like seeing Richard's acting and also just generally, you know, like you try some things and they work. And, you know, like I think that the moment with the Eldridge, for example, the ship, we moved that earlier in the episode. Originally, that was going to be in the finale. And I think that that's what I kind of love about filmmaking, though, is that, you know, you're always kind of rewriting in a sense until it's done. So yeah, and a big part of that is listening to your team as well. Like, and I mean, but whereas with like Last of Us, we didn't have as long for post for that, but I did like a previous sequence for the train, for example, and the TV station I storyboarded with a storyboard artist, all of that, because I just wanted to make sure that it's slightly different in the sense that I'm working with a showrunner on that. So like, I wanted to make sure Craig was happy, for one thing, with my plan of how I was going to do it, but also because when you're doing sequences like that, you don't have there's some time for discovery, but not really on the day, like, because, you know, there's a lot of stunts, there's a lot of effects, and there's a lot to film. So I like to go in with kind of like a solid plan basically on what to do.
When you are there, I mean, aside of the guiding yourself with actors, how do you keep the heart of the scene alive when there's a lot going on,
Mhm.
technically speaking?
I think it's, for me, I always think about the edit in my head. So I'm always thinking about the shot and how that's filling into the story, basically. And yeah, and just tracking emotionally where the characters are at. I think honestly, the hardest thing I found in TV is that you're often filming multiple episodes at the same time. So sometimes it's basically, as not even sometimes, as a director, and the actors will do this as well, but it's tracking, okay, where were they before? How did they feel? And also trying to remember, if I have filmed the scene before, how emotionally did that land? What did we find that we were really excited about? Because then you have to make sure, if you've shifted it slightly, that then the next scene won't seem out of place or strange. And you could be filming that next scene like, I don't know, 2 weeks later, longer, even on a bigger job.
Let's talk about the directing, because directing is you have your vision, and you have all the technical aspects of it, like all the skills that you require. But at the end of it, it's just about collaboration, right? You show up, and then you need to be able to bring people into your vision. So let's talk about how you actually do that. How do you align all the key players, like cinematographers, designers,
Mhm.
VFX teams, all around your vision without boxing them, I guess?
Hmm. Okay, I'm just thinking about it. I would say, like, in terms of, I would go back to Loki, just because I hired all my heads of department on that. And that was a big part of that conversation. You know, when you're first meeting people, seeing if you're creatively aligned. Like, for example, like Kazra had images in his pitch that I had in my pitch. So I already was like, well, we're going to be making the same thing. And I think with collaborating, that's such a key thing across any project I've done, is that everyone will bring their own experience and their taste, which is awesome and can completely enrich a project and make it better. But if you're all making a different story or a different tone, usually it can lead to more problems. Usually, I'm saying usually because sometimes you can find beauty in that. There's always things where people say, oh, this person thought they were acting in this film and it actually made their performance really interesting, but that is not the tone of the movie. Do you know what I mean? But I would say generally, yeah, I think that those initial conversations with the HODs, like my cinematographer, my editor, production designer, that is where I will begin that kind of idea. Because I'll be, for example, like with Natalie, our composer on Loki, I don't think I even said this to her, but in my pitch I had the Swan on Theremin, as because I made like a playlist when I pitched for Loki. But I remember when we were picking composers, I said, or if they're happy to do it, would they maybe just give us an idea of like, what they would like to put on the scene? So we sent them a scene, and I remember that Natalie's pitch for it was very character led, but she also spoke about the music in A Clockwork Orange, which I found fascinating, and using particular types of instruments and the theremin, and having this B movie sci-fi. And the B movie sci-fi thing again was in my pitch, and I was like, oh, that's great. I was like, we're already on the same page, but I would never have thought of A Clockwork Orange in terms of a reference for the music. So I found that really interesting. So that's what I mean in terms of the collaboration. It's kind of finding some taste alignment, but also making sure that people have the space to bring in their own ideas. I think that as a director, you're always kind of steering people towards what the end goal is. But yes, there's a fine line, because if someone just feels like, for example, like with editors, if an editor just feels that they're there to just be almost just like a puppet, like I don't think anyone wants to do that creatively. It doesn't feel good for anyone. So
Yeah.
yeah.
That's interesting what you just said, like about kind of like people making mistakes or wrong assumptions and then coming up with different things. How do you make a space? Is there a way of making space for happy accidents? Like, do you
Oh,
have?
always. I think
Yeah.
as well, because there'll be things as well. Sometimes I'll suggest, and then I'll be like, they'll present something or show me something, and I'll be like, oh, actually, I'm sorry, that was bad. Let's not do that. It's okay. But, and I think in those, that, because otherwise, like, it's called development. So, like, why else? Like, obviously, I think you have to have a clear sense of the ballpark you're in. Otherwise, you're probably in trouble. But I think, yes, there has to be room for drafts and changes. And because I know definitely, like, me and Kazra spoke about, for example, like The Void. I always wanted it to be like this overgrown garden, but he was like, oh, can I show you some other stuff? And I was like, sure. And he showed me some stuff that was very surreal. And in terms of the overall look, I felt wasn't quite right. But out of that conversation, we ended up with the Void turkeys, which is so funny. So, you know what I mean? I think that there's no such thing for me as necessarily like a bad idea in that sense, because I think that's the kind of good stuff usually. Yeah. And also just sometimes you try things like in the edit, for example, you might be like, oh, let's just lose this scene and see what that feels like. And then maybe you test it for people and they're like, oh, like I was really confused. And it's like, oh, okay, actually I've just lived with this for too long and people do need this in the cut. So yeah, so no, I think there has to always be a bit of room for trial and error, always.
Mm. I imagine that to be actually very difficult, because if you are expected to be the one that
Mm-hmm.
steer the wheel into the right direction, is almost contradictory, right? Like that you are
Mm-hmm.
there to trying to be there for everyone, but then you also allow for flexibility and for identifying those moments
Mm-hmm.
and allow them to just be, and make something of them.
There has to just be room for growth and change. And I think it's also, but there is at the same time, yes, as a director, you have to say no to stuff. It can't just be like, yeah, do this, do that. Because I think that's the fine line, is knowing in your gut, if something is so against what the end product will be, then yes, obviously I'd be like, actually, I think that's not the path we should go down. But like, how about we do this instead? So yeah, but I think it's kind of it's definitely a mixture, I would say.
How do you contribute to that? What kind of environment do you try to create, both on set and in post, to help people feel empowered rather than
Mm.
restricted?
I definitely have, like, I always go in with quite a clear idea, I think, in terms of what I want. But I'm definitely always open to ideas for sure. I think, like, like sometimes our teams would pitch like jokes or cool things, like, and like I'm just trying to think now, like for example, like the void in Loki, some of the like weird buildings we had, because I'd be like, okay, I want it to be an idea that there's stuff that almost like was removed from our reality, but it's ended up here. So just give me some like buildings that are strange, or, people be like, oh, that's such an interesting thing to see hidden in the void, like the Eldridge, for example. So that was obviously in the script, though, I should say. But and then also the Marvel Easter eggs. But I had some ideas of what I wanted to put in there. And for example, like Frog of Thunder, I did film a sequence with that character, but it was just very heightened comedically, and Loki had just found out that his mum died. So in the actual cut, it felt, even though that scene was funny, it just wasn't quite right because of like the nature of where it was in the edit. So I was like, okay, well, let's put let's put Frog of Thunder in the void then. And I built this shot deliberately from the bunker hatch that goes down, and then you see the frog. So I think that that's like one idea I had. But sorry, I'm trying to think what you said with like, but I think that is a place that definitely, yeah, visual effects artists can be like, oh, hey, I came up with this really funny idea. Or for example, in the art department, like I remember Loki goes through those cubes, and I remember Kazra was like, oh, the artist I work with had a really funny idea, and he's actually drawn a cat into this scene. Like the guy just lives in there with his cat. And I was like, oh my God, I was like, that is genius. We have to do that. And so that we did get a cat and put the cat in the scene. So yeah, so I think that's the environment I try to create, is like a clear vision about like what we actually need, but giving space within that, so obviously people can pitch fun ideas. And also, like I said, the stuff I tend to do is like comedy, or yeah, if it's genre, you want to have, excitement from people, and people being like, oh, actually this would be a really cool thing to like hide here, or yeah.
Leaving the doors open to
Mm-hmm.
for people to feel free to actually contribute to the film or to the show, right?
Oh, completely, yeah, because I've definitely been in positions where, I mean, just who wants to feel like that, like their idea isn't valued, or their
Yeah.
creative it's just that doesn't really get good work out of anyone, honestly.
Kate, things are changing really fast, as I said. Like, we need to consider AI tools and real time and rendering and virtual production, and nobody really can predict where it's going. So, with all this tech in mind, constantly evolving, how do you stay open to changes without losing your artistic voice?
On Loki, my cinematographer, I said, Blade Runner was one of my references. And she was like, well, actually, I'm going to make these lenses that are very similar to that, but they'll be custom for the show. And I was like, oh, well, that's great. And I think it's the same thing with your visual effects team. Like if they're like, we think this will be an interesting way to approach it, then you have to listen to that and, yeah, talk. And I think that's why you rely on your experts, who you hire.
Mm. Is that frightening for you, like not knowing exactly what to expect, what's going to come at the other end? Or
Um, Frightening, no. I think because, like I said, on Loki, I hadn't filmed. I knew I wanted to do like a kind of Roger Rabbit approach with Miss Minutes. Like I wanted her to be animated, and I wanted her to have this old school look. But had I filmed an animated character before? No. So I would talk to my VFX supervisor and be like, this is what I want to do. How do I go about it? And then they would break it down for me. It's just about information. If you have information, the how to approach filming something is way less scary, you know?
yeah, yeah. You've been in a bit of a journey from, you just said like a couple of times in the shorts. You started within the shorts, and then you went into Marvel, to one of the most iconic franchises in TV. What would you say are the main changes that you have experienced as an artist through that journey?
Oh, interesting. I think there's just that I would say when I started making shorts, you build confidence with everything you do, I would say. And I do think that in terms of how I've changed, I think it's just kind of demystified the process for me. Like now, if I have to do a special effects sequence, there's always a level of, like I want to do this well and do it correctly. So you don't want to be too like relaxed about it. But I come in with a level of confidence now, having done a lot of effects heavy stuff, where I know that I have expertise in terms of how I can approach this. And for example, like, yes, if I had another animated character now, it wouldn't be as intimidating to me because I've done that before. It'd be intimidating in that I would want to do a good job and I would have a standard I would like hold myself to. But in terms of like the method of how to film it, I would be like, oh, okay, this is fine. I'm going to approach it this way. And we just have to make sure we build into the day time to do this. You know what I mean? So I think that's more in the sense of how I've changed, I guess. And for now, it's like, for me, honestly, like I think it's so interesting. I think it's more just in terms of the change. I've gained more experience in things, but for me, it's always story first. It's like, what's a story that interests me? And yeah, that's always
Has
what I'm chasing.
has that changed? So aside of the technical side, do you feel you have changed as an artist in terms of like what makes you tick?
I think there's a thing where you always hope as an artist that you're not making the same thing again, right? But at your core, like your soul, there will be things that you will bring to every job because that is just who you are and that is what you bring to the stuff you write or direct or make. Because that, and I do believe that strongly. Like when I haven't got a job, for example, I've been like, well, it just wasn't mine to have. But when I have got a job, I mean, like I said, like I'd mentioned Loki a lot, but you know, when I pitched on that, I pitched them like a very noir kind of look to that show because I was like, Loki's trying to solve who this other Loki is. And I think it would be cool and interesting if they had this look, for example. And I remember going into it and I was thinking, well, if they don't like this take, that's fine because I just wasn't the right person for this job, you know. And it was the same like with the architecture. When I met them about it, I was like, I think the TVA should have brutalist architecture, partly led by the fact that I grew up in Southeast London. You know, I used to live near Thamesmead. There's a lot, I mean, they're gone now, but they used to have these massive buildings that were in a Clockwork Orange. And like, and you know, and you've seen like the South Bank in London has a lot of that brutalist architecture. So I liked the idea of it having that oppressive architecture because the TVA are all not what they seem story wise, but then they're also the good guys. So it does also have this modern kind of like Mad Men kind of fun look to it as well. So,
It's funny because you talk about it almost like it's something normal, right? Like it's something normal. Like you go in, you walk
yeah,
in. If they don't like me, that's fine because this is who I am. I don't know
yeah.
if you're aware how, you know, what level of confidence it takes for a person to actually do that when you so desperately want something, you know,
Oh,
like,
complete.
yeah,
Look,
yeah.
I did that, but well, I think it's the thing because I really wanted that job. I remember like I didn't hear for 2 weeks after pitching, and I remember just walking around feeling physically sick for weeks because I was like, I just haven't got it. It's not going to happen. But at the same time, I can't commit to something and do it well. Okay, here's a good description of it. There's a producer I know, and he told me, I remember he said, be really careful what you put your name on because if you die while making it, they will dedicate it to your memory. And I think about this all the time because I'm like, if I, and obviously it's not like I'm like, I hope this doesn't happen, obviously. But how bad would it be if that happened? And it was just the stinkiest, worst thing. And it's like in memory, I mean, it'd be very funny, but you know, but like, but I still am like, I have to believe in the work and want it to be good. Cause also like if I'm like as involved as I was on Loki, for example, that job is my life for like 3 years and I have to live and breathe it. And I feel like you have to love it because how else will it get to be good? And how else will you, you know, collaborate with your team and inspire your team? So I think I always had that rule as well that I don't generally want to do anything that I'm not a fan of, you know, in terms of like I'm working on a Sims film at the moment and I love that game. So like I was like, you know, I went very strongly after that project and was like, here's what I would do with it because I love it. But at the same time was like, but if you don't, you know, if it's not what you're looking for, that's fine. But I just think there's some, but I agree with you. Yes, like obviously this is a very privileged position because you can't always work on stuff that is your greatest passion, obviously. But I think for me, it's always about the core values of the project. Do I find it psychologically okay? So, like The Last of Us, for example, I love that game. I think about the way it talks about empathy in storytelling in the video game space is fascinating to me. And so when I found out they were making a TV show, I was really excited to, you know, just see if I could maybe be part of that in some way. But as a writer, that is very different to what I would normally write. I would say the stuff I write is more in like the Loki space, and that it's got a sense of playfulness to it, and generally it's quite hopeful. But at the same time, it doesn't mean that I don't necessarily want to, I don't always have to do that. But I think for me, it has to be about, what is the work saying, basically.
Yeah. Yeah, I think, I mean, meeting you and talking to you makes complete sense what you're saying. But I'm always kind of like fascinated about the I guess the approach that each artist has, because I hear actors talking a lot about two different ways of approaching this. One is kind of like always choose your, you have the Daniel Lewis approach, like the careers. They choose what to do, very specific, always hitting the mark, and then you have people like Adam Sandler, or which are incredible actors, but then they choose to take another path, or like, I don't know, other people who say, do as much as you can, because you
Yeah.
never know what's going to be right. But I think it takes different personalities and different kind of like goal setting mind, like to walk each way, right?
Well, it's also the thing as well, I should say, that you always hope that what you're working on will be good. And I will always take a project hoping that, like, anytime you see a project that misses the mark, or a story that wasn't, or a film that isn't good, no one making that film intended that. You know what I mean? No one sets out to make a bad project. So I think that's the thing with, yes, you don't always know how stuff is going to be received in our industry. And in a sense, it's such a bizarre choice to live your life this way, because it is a gamble every time. But I think for me, that's why, no matter what the outcome of a project is, and obviously I've been very lucky in that the stuff I've done has been well received generally, but I would say that I have to therefore like love the project, because if it isn't, then at least I can be like, you know what, okay, I guess we maybe missed the mark with this one, but I do care about this story. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. What is something you're talking about learning? What is something you learn about directing through working with VFX that you
Mhm.
wish you known earlier?
Oh gosh. I mean, everything, I guess. Like, I think just because I was so intimidated by it, not in a bad way, but just in a way of, oh, could I do this, or could I not do that? You know what I mean? I think it's so much about demystifying it. And I do think now that's why I love there's a lot of videos on like YouTube, for example, where they kind of show like the layers of, it'll be like, this is what it looked like when they filmed it, then this is what it looked like in stage 2 or stage 3. And I think that in itself is like such a good film school for people, and so helpful, because I think that's the thing, it can feel very, the unknowable can be what's so intimidating about it for me. But I actually, to be honest, found working with the VFX team just very comforting, very collaborative, and very supportive. I think that was the main thing, is that I was like, I want it to feel like this, I want it to look like this. But then you work with these amazing artists who elevate that idea. And I think that would be the main thing I wish I'd known, was just that it isn't going to be as I think in my head, I always just thought, oh, it's going to be very difficult to work, but actually it's not. If you have a good team around you, then it's fine. It's just about preparation and planning.
Yeah. I hope you know that you have a lot of fans in the visual effects community, and
Uh,
is where you can find most nerds per square meter in any industry. So
No,
yeah.
I love it. I always like working with the VFX teams on stuff, because yes, it's just fun. You
Mm.
just get to nerd out, basically. So yeah, I've always very much enjoyed it. And like I said, I think it's just, I can't draw at all. So I always just have a lot of respect. It just blows my mind how people can do that.
What advice would you give to a director in your position right now who wants to do ambitious visual storytelling but
Mm.
doesn't know any of what you've learned recently?
Well, look, I think that my career has been very surprising in some ways, because, yes, like I loved movies like this, but I did not know that I would get to work on stuff like this. Like my very first TV job was a drama for BBC, and it was a short film. And before this drama, it was the Idris Elba short 5 by 5. And before this, I'd only made very silly comedy films. But it's just this, there was like someone in the team on that who had met me and was like, come meet us to talk about directing on this. And I was like, oh, wow, okay. And I was really excited, because it challenged me as a director, because I hadn't really done a lot of drama. And I was like, okay, I'm going to really go at this and see if I can, again, talk about how I would like it to look as a director and see if that kind of, connected with them as well. And it did. But that challenged me and taught me, oh, I can do drama. So, because at the time I was like, oh, I just make silly comedy shorts. And like, so I think that was amazing in that sense because it really gave me that experience. And then that led me on to sex education, which was a blend of both those genres. But after sex ed, I remember saying to my agents, I was like, look, I really want to do stuff with effects. And yeah, and I directed on one like kind of genre show, but I didn't get an episode that was effects heavy because I didn't have that experience. So I think that for me, Loki just really changed my life, honestly, in terms of, because I think that the challenge I always had was, as a writer, I would always write genre stuff and I loved doing that. But usually the thing that would happen is they would say, like, if you ever want to get this made, you probably will have to give it to another director who's already done this. So I guess my best advice, look, I think Gareth Edwards is really inspiring. Go make monsters, think of I know obviously he did those effects himself, but I would also say, like, there are so many people that I'm sure want to be like VFX supervisors who might be willing to collaborate with you on something, or like just building up your community. So that would be my advice, honestly. If you want to do big genre storytelling, just thinking of a way to do that on a smaller scale. But monsters would probably be my best reference or advice, and story first as well, because I think that's the thing, that's what helps stuff rise above, is that you, at its heart, you always need a good story.
So just go for it.
Yeah, I think so. Why not? Like, I don't know, I always think it's just working with what you have, and entering every scheme you can, and just keep making stuff, honestly.
Before we let you go, there's a little tradition here at Pixel Puzzle. If you had the chance to change a CG character, a CG environment, or a whole CG world from an existing film or TV series, what would it be and how would you go about it?
So I have like a cheeky answer to this, but my answer would be like, so my partner's really into the Charlie's Angels franchise and Transformers. And like, but recently enlightened me to there are two scenes in both these movies. So the first Charlie's Angels film, this is the one with Cameron Diaz, and like basically it's like at the Griffith Observatory, and there's this big kind of like face off there with the characters. But in Transformers, there is also a moment in that film where they are also at the Griffith Observatory, and I think people aren't supposed to know that they exist, but they're kind of just out in the open coming up with a plan on the observatory. So my dream would actually be not to change anything, but I think it would be funnier if the Charlie's Angels were in Transformers, because tonally I just find that quite funny. So I would like to put both those scenes into the same universe at the same time at the observatory. And maybe the observatory is open and people are having to deal with
Oh, so
what
you're
is
not
happening up
swapping
there.
them. You're not
No.
swapping them. You're just merging them.
Yes.
Very good.
That would be my answer.
I mean, I think if Michael Bay was to direct it, he probably solved it by putting another explosion behind. So
yeah.
was just as a last good, before we say goodbye, what's one insight from your career that you wish more people truly understood?
I think just know that tell the stories that excite you. It's very like filled with dreams, but like build it and they will come. I truly believe that, because I remember making my shorts. I was like, I mean, look, I did a very silly short film about a smear test with puppets. Like, it's a silly film, but it got into festivals and helped me meet people. And you will find your community, by telling the stories that like you want to tell and the stories that mean something to you. So I think that would be my main bit of advice. Is I think there can feel like a pressure when you're first like going out to like write or direct stuff to like, and obviously I should say it's smart to look at the marketplace and see what's being made, obviously, but at the same time, and I have spoke about this earlier in the interview, but just that you are unique and have a unique perspective on just on the world that no one else will have, because you are you. So I think that that's my advice, is just tell the stories that excite you, because that's what's going to be so much more interesting than trying to be someone else.
Kate, thank you so much. Thank you for your time and for your
Thank you.
honesty and your brilliant brain.
Oh, Thank you.
It's been a pleasure.
Thank you. It was very nice chatting. Cheers. Thank you.